Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to another episode of Voices for Excellence. I am your host, Dr. Michael Connor, CEO and founder of the Agile Evolutionary Group and proud host of VFE Season 3, everybody. Welcome back again. And yes, we are in December heading into 2025, but I did this episode deliberately and brought this great leader, this catalyst, that's a part of the name of this company, as well as I call him one of the AI czars in our field, Mr. Jason Green. He is here on Voices for Excellence. Now, I met Jason. Now, how long ago was this? 6, 7, 8, a while ago,
Yeah.
right? Getting old, bro. That's what that means.
Yeah, over 5 years for sure.
Over 5 years. Yes, me, Jason and I, we
Yeah.
met at Martha's Vineyard for Innovation for Equity Summit, where we gathered together. It was great. One of the IFE founders, very honored with that. And since then, Jason and I have just stayed in touch. We've always, talk AI, we talk education, but more importantly, how are we changing the ecosystem for Generation Z and Generation Alpha? So without further ado, it is my honor to have Mr. Jason Green. He is the proud co-founder of LINC, Learning Innovation Catalyst. Now, I'll tell you this was not a fad that was created in the AC stage of education. Jason was pioneering AI and AI in education pre-pandemic. Okay, I just want to clarify that because this is not, one of the companies that started because of AI and the trends of AI. No, he's been leading AI on this consistent continuum, and that's why, he got me like, Jason, what's this AI stuff in education? And he's like, okay, yeah, come on. So we were talking about this, and I remember when the pandemic, and I apologize for going on a diatribe because this shows my affinity for Jason, right when the pandemic hit. And I remember when we were moving to online learning, when we were moving to asynchronous, synchronous learning, and also how are we going to be able to enhance capacity with my teachers? I'm like, wait a minute, Jason got that, called him right up. We were one of the first to have LINC incorporated in our district when I was a superintendent. So without further ado, and he's going to highlight, he was a part of the New York City DOE AI Summit where he was on a panel with Colin Kaepernick, and then also his new evolution and innovation out of LINC, which is Your Way Learning, and we are going to get in that today. But without further ado, Mr. Jason Green, good brother, how are you?
I'm doing great, man. I'm doing great. It's good to see you. It's good to reconnect. It's always good to be part of a conversation with you. We always seem to have a chance to elevate what's possible, elevate what's possible for all learners. As you mentioned, we've been in this space for a long time, and it's exciting. I know for a lot of folks right now, it's a time of anxiousness. It's a time of, I really believe, imagination. And let's go, man. Let's have a good time with this and see what we can put together.
Absolutely. And Jason, I'll tell you this, for this duration of this time, I appreciate you being a mentor in the field because I remember when I made this transition and I was like, Jason, I
Yeah.
really want to incorporate AI. Obviously, we've been talking about this for years now. I want to be able to have this as a synergistic thread within my corporation. And Jason has just been a steadfast mentor to me. So I appreciate you, brother. But the all cameras, or I should say, the Zoom camera is on you because my audience want to learn from you. But Jason, leaders across the country, superintendents, chief academic officers, CEOs of startups or Education 500 companies, they know or have engaged with you regarding your corporation company, which is LINC. You're a preliminary or a sought after keynote speaker, high level at the national. You're in these think tanks, really crafting what AI looks like in education. But what song comes to mind to describe Jason T. Green's work in this ecosystem?
I love that question, man. I love kicking off with it. So I'm a Philadelphia guy. So
Mm-hmm.
so for me, I'm actually gonna go to the roots. From Things Fall Apart, one of my favorite albums of all time. They have a song called The Next Movement. And there's a verse in there where Black Thought says the whole state of the world's about to change.
Mm-hmm.
And that's exciting to me. And he said this was years ago when Things Fall Apart came out. But that's the moment that we're in. We're in a moment where the whole state of the world is about to change. And I'm a big believer that what educators do now, what education leaders do now, is going to have a dramatic impact on what that actually looks like, how we respond to it, and as or more importantly, what we create in it. And so that's what I'm gonna go with. The roots, things fall apart, the next movement.
Absolutely. The roots. Wow. Jason, I tell you, I'm gonna have to dig that out of the archives with roots, man. Grateful. But what I love about what you stated, and I think there's systemic correlation, not causality, correlation with this statement. The state of the world is about to change, and we're seeing this happen in education. Jason, I always say within my keynote presentations is that our students or our Generation Z, Generation Alpha, they operationalize in this Netflix, Amazon, Lyft, Uber world, but then they enter an operating model in education that is underscored with blockbuster structures, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
we have to be able to change that educational world, that entity for them. And we're seeing that this level of innovation is accelerating in this time. And I love how you stated that we need to create it, right? We need to create what this look like. And I think these dimensions around AI, around adaptive softwares and solutions and technologies is going to continuously change the world for our students in Generation Alpha, Generation Z. But let's get to something that you wrote in the BC stage of education
Yeah,
before COVID-19, right? And
yeah,
Jason, this into my audience is still, you know how you have, Jason, those goodies that you reference, right?
yeah.
You're always going to reference like a Peter Singate's work. You're always going to reference Daniel Kahneman's, book around Think Fast, Think Slow. Well, to my audience, blended learning in action is one of these goodies that you're going to reference 20
Yeah.
years later, right? Because it was so, I would like to say, foundational. It was so
Hmm.
innovative at the time when you wrote it, and now I find myself using threads and citing you in the course that the doctoral course that I teach around disruptive spaces and what does this look like from a blended context. But you co-authored Blended Learning in Action with Caitlin Tucker and Tiffany Wyckoff, right? The full
Yeah.
name of my audience is Blended Learning in Action, a practical guide towards sustainable change. The book itself, Jason, BC Stage of Education, was progressive at its time. It was released in 2016.
Mm.
Now, the methods, right, of blended learning they were semi-novel, right? Because it
Hmm.
was at that stage where blended learning, AI technology wasn't a concretized strategy per se within
Yeah.
leadership or in education. But now we're in the AC stage of education after COVID. The
Hmm. Hmm.
second, I like to say the second semester of that AI first economy. What does blended learning look like and feel like now with the advanced disruption of AI in the ecosystem? And then the second part, Jason, are
Hmm.
there elements of your book within this model where new emergent trends have accelerated the 2016 definition of blended learning proposed in your text?
Yeah. Yeah, it's such a good question. And it's interesting, Michael, because when we wrote this book, we very intentionally didn't make it about a specific technology. We made it about what is the impact that meaningful technology application can have in classrooms. All right. So what that meant was you're not going to see this cool new tool or this hot new thing. What you're actually going to see is what is actually good teaching and good learning.
Mhm.
In essence, what is pedagogy? And when we take that lens, and I've taken this lens since I started, my career in education, it was when do we see students actually engage in learning? When do we see them lean into learning? When do we see them actually come to life? And you and I'm sure we've both been in situations. I remember so vividly there was a school that I went to where I walked from one classroom down the hall where students were literally sitting passively in the seat, visibly disengaged. You can tell that there wasn't anything inspiring about what was happening in that classroom. Down the hall, I walked into another classroom and it was a complete mess of learning. There
Mhm.
was chairs everywhere. Students were active. The teacher was letting the students actually drive their learning. It was from one classroom to the next and in a whole different world.
Yeah.
So, when you see situations like that, you begin to realize like good teaching is good teaching. Good learning is good learning. Now, we can overlay technology on that. Technology can accelerate that, but it doesn't change the fundamentals of how we learn, right? So, when we wrote Blend Learning in Action back in 2016, it was in what I would call like the first kind of second wave of really ed tech moving into schools. You saw a lot of digital curriculum, you saw Chromebooks, you saw, more one-to-one adoptions, things like this. But what you saw in those periods was a Chromebook adoption, go into a classroom, you'd walk in, and 7 times out of 10, the Chromebooks were either still in the charger, maybe in the closet, or at best, they were being used as digital worksheets, right? They didn't have the transformative impact that we were hoping they were going to have. And I argue that that was in large part not because the Chromebooks weren't functional or didn't have the operational power. It was because we didn't address the mindset and the culture
Mhm.
of what it looks like to shift from teachers being deliverers of content to actually facilitators of learning experience. That's the difference. That's the mindset shift. Okay. So our work focused on what does it look like when a teacher actually is a facilitator of learning experiences. And it was quite simple. We created a framework that we call the pack. We still use it today, even in a AI world, where we
Mhm.
look at the umbrella of P for personalization, and then we look at agency, authenticity, connectivity, and creativity. If you look at any classroom where those elements are present, you'll see engaged learners invariably. So now, before AI, this was incredibly possible. You could do amazing things with technology, amazing things to have technology support these efforts, whether it was interactive whiteboard, whether it was Chromebooks or iPads. I saw a classroom years ago that leveraged a one-to-one initiative with an informative writing assignment, where instead of the students just write an informative article, work with your colleagues to research a topic of your choosing. Once you research it, collaborate on the writing of it, and then present it out to the class and eventually create a magazine for the school. Think about that. An informative writing assignment that kids loved, and technology accelerated that. Now,
Right.
that was 8 years ago.
Mhm.
Let's fast forward to now where we are today. Good teaching is still good teaching. Good learning is still good learning, right? But now we're in
Mhm.
this world of AI where the possibilities have now been made exponential. All right. So AI can either be hmm, my students are going to use this AI tool and all they're going to do is cheat with it. They're going to write in the prompt and I'm going to now get a bunch of essays that ChatGPT wrote. That's one possibility. Another possibility is, wait a minute, if I think about how these students might actually learn, how to learn with the usage of a AI tool, now what possibilities can be created?
Yeah.
Hmm. I might be able to create a full persuasive argument situation between myself and an AI tool that now accelerates how my writing is able to advance. Huh. I'm now a struggling learner and I need immediate help from something that actually knows what my problem is and I can get that help. Hmm. I'm working in a group with my peers and we're trying to figure out how to solve pollution, plastics in the ocean, you name it. Huh. How might this AI thing be able to help spur ideas and push us along? One last one. I'm a teacher who's had a lesson plan that I've been using for 20 years that my students clearly are no longer responding to? What if I used AI to help me generate ideas, creativity on how to actually advance my lesson plan to make it way more engaging, personalized, etc. So what I'm actually seeing, Michael, is we have an opportunity now with AI that the things that we put in place around mindset, culture, how technology can become meaningful have been accelerated while simultaneously the issue of mindset and culture and how we think about that shift from content delivery to facilitation of instructional experiences, if we haven't made that shift, we're going to have the same cycle that we were in before. So that's how I kind of think about the work that I've been engaged in is the technology extremely important, but underneath it is how do we see ourselves as educators and what we're actually bringing to the classroom. That hasn't changed. And I will tell you, we
Yeah.
haven't fully won that battle yet.
Yeah. Yeah. Jason, excellent response, right? A ton of notes on this question and answer to my audience. This is one of the answers that you want to asynchronously play back because there's a lot of very, very good strategies, but a key theme that Jason highlighted, and he is one of the AI and tech czars across the country as well as internationally. But I loved how the focus was on good teaching and good learning, right? And technology and AI is a tool to enhance good teaching, good learning, the foundations of our classrooms. I wanted you to expand on this, Jason, because it's so important. I think there's this separation around different tools, around different platforms, technology as a domain, but there isn't much of an emphasis on mindset and culture, right? Organizational culture, learning culture, school culture is very important, specifically when we talk about mindset, a shared mental model around this technological integration into our classrooms as well as into our leadership practices. If you can expand on the how do you move or shift mindsets into this shared or collective ecosystem so that now the acceleration is more parallel as
Yeah.
opposed to, I like to say ad hoc in the context of, various mind frames, mindsets around technology, AI integration, and how can that mindset impact culture simultaneously?
Yeah. So this this is my favorite topic. It's culture change. It's how do you bring in innovation? It's what's happening right now with the machines that people are
Mm-hmm.
bumping up against the machines that are now actively now shifting our world.
Yeah,
And what we're finding is the machines that are actually people in many ways become the most important and
yeah.
oftentimes the most overlooked part of this equation, right? Bring any technology to a space, if we don't really work with the understanding of how, especially adults, learn, we're actually going to miss the boat on what's possible with that technology. That's why, Mike, when people say to me, I'm worried about cheating with AI, my response to them is, you're in the wrong conversation.
Yeah.
What you're
Yeah.
really talking about is you're worried about how we are not shifting how we're thinking about learning as humans. And now we're blaming it on AI and cheating. Whereas what we really should be doing is shifting how we're thinking about teaching and learning and now the world that we're entering into. All right. So let's fast forward a little bit. So when you think about culture change, I'm actually reading a really fascinating book right now called Change Makers. And it
Mhm.
talks about how to actually think about shifting change in complex organizations. All right. Schools are some of the most complex organizations when you think about how many different things are impacting why schools stay so rigid. Okay. we've got policies, protocols, we've got politics. We have all these different layers that have to be adjusted. And unfortunately, schools and school districts, almost by nature, are not organizations that learn. They're organizations that just that teach. But right now, we need them to be organizations that learn, right?
Mm.
I use the example, a lot of us do a Blockbuster a lot, where to me, the biggest failing that Blockbuster had, the video to Netflix, was it didn't learn as times changed. Times
Right.
were changing. They were actually well set up to make a shift, but they
Yeah.
didn't learn as times were shifting. Okay. So there's a few examples, and I'll highlight one of seeing and helping to make culture change happen. All right. So there was a school that we were working with. This was a high school, and it was it was a struggling high school. Low achievement scores. It was, and what the vision was of the school leadership was to bring in blended learning and shift what you saw from classroom to classroom was teachers lecturing and students completely like glazed over. Okay.
Right.
So we said to the school leader, we said, listen, if we're going to really tackle this problem, we're not just going to tackle it by doing a bunch of workshops about station rotation and flip learning. You know, when you look at it, most of what teachers do in kind of your traditional PD, it doesn't make it back to the classroom. So I said, what we need to do is actually have a structured, thoughtful approach to culture change. So
Mhm.
we had a number of different strategies. One that I loved the most from this was we gave the principal a set of cards that actually said on them, innovator in action. Okay.
Right.
Just think about that. That's all it said. Innovator in action. Had a nice little graphic. And we said to the principal, we're going to give these to teachers so that when they're trying something new, they're going to just put this card on their door. Okay.
Right.
That's it. Doesn't seem like much, but consider what this card did. All right. For most teachers, the reason why it's so hard to shift is you don't want to mess up. You're worried about, what if somebody comes into my classroom when this new flip learning thing I'm doing is falling apart? What if my students, there's all these what ifs. But if I put this card on my door and it says innovator in action, if somebody comes to my door and things are falling apart, I can say, oh, I'm innovating right now,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm. Mhm.
It creates safety. It
Right.
creates a place where teachers can actually try something. Now, what if it completely falls apart, right? And now the teacher is like, oh, that didn't go so well, which most things don't go well the first time we try them, right? The teacher now is seeing themselves more as an innovator who's tinkering towards something new. It's not about getting it right the first time. It's not about perfection. It's about I'm trying something new. So we began to roll these cards out. First week, you saw a card here, card there, one or two across the school. Okay. A few months later, we saw a few more cards out, right? By the end of the year, you saw innovator in action cards all over because we
Right.
made it safe for people to say, I can do this and I have a little bit of cover while I'm trying something new. By the end of that year, we went from a school that was largely lecture. You'd be hard pressed to find a classroom where students were actively engaged in their learning because that was the traditional scheme. By the end of the year, you'd be hard pressed to find a lecture classroom. You saw station rotation, you saw flipped learning, you saw playlists, you saw teachers now collaborating with each other because now they're saying, oh, what did you try today? What did you try today? That's culture change, right?
Mhm.
And part of where the book that we wrote, the work that we're doing now, is still really focused on that understanding of adults,
Yeah.
where you begin to recognize what does it take for an adult to actually lean into a new way of being, to lean into a new way of practicing their craft. And so that culture piece becomes such an important thing. And so we really revel in being able to support leaders in your work is actually not just about, doing observations and the administrative stuff. you're actually now a culture leader. And what that
Yeah.
means is making strategic moves to create a space of safety, a space of collaboration, and a space of risk taking,
Yeah.
right? Where
Yeah.
people can trust that if I try something new, I'm not going to get dinged for it. We're innovating right now in this space.
Absolutely. Jason, profound approach. Because when I think of education in totality, specifically leaders, stakeholders, we have this, I like to say, inverse of
Hmm.
strategy before culture,
Hmm.
meaning, and i.e., to my audience, blended learning techniques, models, variants, tenets of it, then culture. What
Hmm.
Jason did was culture first that has this residual impact on strategy, various blended learning model elements, i.e., Jason was highlighting station rotation, flipped classroom, a la carte playlist. Now, the culture mindset of the practitioners, leaders is that it's okay to innovate, it's okay to iterate, it's okay to tinker. Because remember, the standardization of education creates these bureaucracies where innovation, creativity, is very limited. Jason, unbelievable. Love that answer to my audience. Please play that back because, again, there are deliberate meta and mega themes around culture to impact strategy. I always say culture eats strategy. Jason, you contextualize it in such a simplistic form. But listen, I'm mad at you because you flipped the professional learning model. Andragogy on steroids, brother, with you. We're going to unpack this. We're going to get to your way. But I'll tell you this. We want to talk about Clay Christensen's work around disruptive innovation, if we want to talk about Michael Horn's work, I'm sorry, Michael Tushman's work around innovation streams, the way Jason flipped I like to say, flipped andragogy or the professional learning model for adults. It is at that discontinuous innovation stream, coherence process three of serial disruption. This is the type, but here we go, Jason, when we
Hmm.
talk about this, right? We talk about all the tenets within the blended learning model to get to that level of personalization for our students,
Yeah.
pedagogy. You were able to align that around this level of personalization with andragogy,
Hmm.
adult learning sciences. We'll get to Dr. Ball's work that I admire, one of your mentors as well. But
Yeah.
unpack this first. LINC has
Yeah.
did this. We'll get into a segue of your way, but LINC
Hmm.
has already did this. How
Yeah.
did you reassess, reimagine the standardization of the professional learning model? But more importantly, how do we create parallel tracks now for our
Yeah.
leaders and our teachers?
Yeah. Oh man, this is it right here. When I talk about like the people machine, if we get this figured out, bring AI, bring generative AI, bring AGI, bring anything, and we're going to be able to adjust to it. It's the people machine that we have to focus on. So what got me really interested in this many years ago, now almost 15 years ago, was seeing classrooms at kind of this singular level transform, right? They transform because of what I shared earlier, the agency, the authenticity, the create. And then we said, what if we were able to, at a more macro level, shift how the adult learner was able to really respond and create, okay? And as with many organizations, you start with what you know. You start with workshops. You start with, the things that are more traditional. You start with the coaching. You start with, all right, we got to teach them more. We got to teach them, we got to teach them how to do this, how to do that. We all know who's been anywhere close to education that the traditional modes of professional development are, in many cases, loathed by teachers.
Right.
It's a waste of their time. They sit there and wait until it's over in many cases because it's not relevant to their practice. They go back to their classrooms and they focus on what's important to them and their students. Okay. That doesn't work. And unfortunately, there's still thousands of hours and millions of dollars spent in that structure. Okay. Now, what I wanted to do was say, okay, there's got to be another way to come at this. So we had a chance back in 2011, 2012 to meet Dr. Anitha Ball, of Stanford University. She's an incredible thinker. She's one of the only people in the world that's actually studied teacher development and teacher growth, not only longitudinally, right, over a number of years, but also cross-nationally. So she studied teachers in Australia, in New Zealand, in South Africa, all over the US. And she deeply wanted to understand when teachers actually are able to make the shifts in their classrooms to meet the needs of their learners, what actually is needed. And not surprisingly, it wasn't a bunch of workshops. What it was a process of reflection on current practice and beliefs. How do I think about myself? How do I think about my role? How do I think about my students? It was a process of ideological becoming, which she calls, how do I now engage, now that I'm like seeing myself and taking this reflection, which she called metacognitive awareness, how do I now, with a better understanding of myself, move to a place of engaging with new discourse, engaging with new ideas? This is what she would call ideological becoming, engaging with new ways of being, new ways of thinking. Now, once I have new ways of thinking and being, how do I then bring them into my classroom in a way that is an action research approach, internalizing these new behaviors, trying them out, seeing what works, seeing what doesn't, making adjustments? And then how do I take that into what she ultimately called a generative space? Dr. Ball was talking about generativity
Mhm.
20, 30 years before everybody else.
Yes, yes, she
Think
was.
about
Yes, she
that.
was. Yes, she
Dr.
was. Yes,
Ball
she
was
was.
talking about, now we're all talking about it. She was talking
We,
about
we, we
this
got the
20.
we got the evidence. We got the
We
evidence. We
we
got the book.
have the evidence. She was so far ahead.
Yes, she
Now,
was.
what she said was a generative teacher was a teacher that was able to be in this continuous state of reflection, iteration, learning your students, and eventually the co-creation of new knowledge. What does generative AI do? It creates based
Mhm.
on what it has learned. Dr. Ball said 20 years ago that the generative teacher creates knowledge in the classroom for themselves and with their learners based on what they are learning and how they're responding to their environment. This is when my favorite phrase from her is teachers become agents of change, not objects of change, right?
Mhm.
So we can make this very real, Mike, and we can just say, so that teacher that's been lecturing, they have their lesson plan, they've been doing this for 20 years, they might stop and say, I've been lecturing to my students. I'm not getting the same response that maybe I used to get. Something's different. We're not seeing it. Reflection. All right,
Yeah.
let me try something new. Maybe it's not a lecture. Maybe let me try a station rotation. Let me mix this up a little bit. Maybe there's another way I can do this. Collaborative station, digital station. Maybe now I have a teacher intervention station. Not a lecture. Let's see how this station thing works. All right, let me give it a shot. They go to the next stage. They try it. Guess what? It doesn't work very well. The first day, it's super hard. The kids are like, what are we doing? Why are we moving? Teacher's like, oh my gosh, why am I not lecturing? This is weird. You know what people do most of the time when that happens? They revert back to what they used to know.
Yeah.
So now, Dr. Ball's work in that phase of internalization was the hardest thing to do. Even when people try a new thing, if it doesn't work well the first one or two times, it's hard to stay with it. Internalizing means you're workshopping that thing. You're
Yeah.
staying in there, right? And this is where, and we'll get to it in a moment, but it's that internalization phase that structurally we rarely have given teachers the opportunity to continuously, you're not going to get it right. That's okay. Have grace with yourself, have grace with your students. Keep at it. Station rotation day one, day two to day 10, very different, but you got to
Mhm.
get to day 10. Yeah. And that's again where the culture piece becomes so critical because it's got to be a safe enough space, a risk-taking enough space that you can just hang in there in that discomfort. That's where adult learning science, that's where that model of generative change becomes so important because it follows the flow of how somebody actually does bring new practice in, not just hear this thing, go do it. No, no. Work internally with yourself to now shift to a new way of how you can show up and be for your students.
Yeah, yeah, Jason, thank you for creating that because I think your model around professional learning and coupling it with the adult learning sciences, Dr. Boyle's work is just absolutely phenomenal. I always look at how companies as well as education, 500 organizations, how they're aligning products, services, solutions to what research design or instructional design and how
Yeah.
you essentially created those verticals, intersectionality of those verticals of instructional design and research design that's evident within your product is certainly fascinating, innovative. And shout out to Dr. Ball, man. Yes, Dr. Listen, Jason put me on the Dr. Ball's work. So, and then I became a disciple of her work. How are you, Dr. Ball? Well with you. Such a fan of your work. But Jason, your way, right? Your way learning. Wow. Okay. New solution, everything. Please unpack that for us because I'm still learning about it, brother.
Yeah. So here's what we found. So we worked with Dr. Ball. We created this kind of methodology. We merged technology so that this research was actually embedded in a platform that we developed, again, about 7 years ago now, that was able to bring this research out to the world, to teachers. This was exciting because this was what should happen with research. When it works, it should have a chance to not just stay in the university or wherever it came from. It should get out into the world. Okay. Now, you talk about this often. COVID happened, right? And COVID dramatically shifted what was experienced by learners, what we saw as possible. So coming out of COVID, there's a number of things that happened. The one that I'll focus on is learners came back not only with higher needs around variability, but also different ways of how they saw that learning could happen. Okay. More asynchronous. Oh, maybe I don't need to be in this seat to learn this. There was a shift in how learning was actually able to take place. So what that meant was, as with anything, we had to also evolve to what was changing. So now, as learner variability also went up, social emotional needs, students coming back to the classroom with very different, grade levels, skill needs, etc. What that meant now for teachers was their work actually got harder. So we're seeing the impact of that, Mike. We're seeing teacher retention issues. We're seeing teacher morale. We're seeing these challenges. Okay. So anything that related to professional development, now it was even more important that it didn't pull teachers away from their already busy schedules and busy lives.
Right.
Here's the transformation. When you look at PD, even the PD that we were doing before, it still required teachers to have to come out of their classroom to go to a thing to learn something. Okay. Maybe it was at a workshop, but also maybe it was at an asynchronous online course, right? Maybe it was coaching outside the classroom, but even still, it required them to have to come out of the space where they were most needed to be. They didn't
Mhm.
have the time, they didn't have the energy for that. So what we said was, maybe there's a way with AI that we can actually solve two things at once. Give teachers their time back while simultaneously elevating their practice.
Mm.
It's not just about giving them their time back. If all we do with AI is save time, then what actually can happen is we can bring outdated, misaligned instructional practices into the
Exactly.
classroom faster.
Correct.
So we can't just save time. We actually have to save time while simultaneously elevating teacher practice. Ah, we can do this. So what we said was we're going to apply the adult learning science of that phase of internalization that I talked about earlier, that bring it to the classroom, that hardest phase, we're going to say, what if we condensed or inverted so that that phase of I'm trying a new thing that's relevant to my classroom, that's relevant to my learners, I'm able to try something and
Yeah.
simultaneously elevate what I'm able to do at the same time. That's the ticket. So what's amazing, Mike, is we are LINC Learning. I would say we were a great professional development company. We delivered workshops, we delivered coaching. We were really proud of that with Your Way, and now we're actually shifting our branding to Your Way Learning. It's very exciting. There'll be more to come on
Well,
that. With
congratulations.
you, thank you, thank you. Because what we're seeing is we are delivering the best PD we have ever delivered, leveraging generative AI. Here's what's happening. Teacher has a need to support their learners because of this variability. They go into Your Way, they find a pre-prompted AI tool called Differentiate My Lesson.
Wow.
They put in the inputs of what their students need, what their learning outcomes are. And because we've pre-programmed that tool around differentiation with the best practices of how to differentiate by process, by product, by content, now that teacher in seconds is getting support on differentiation in a way that could take hours of coaching or in a way that could take hours of a workshop. Now they're just able to go and do it.
Yeah.
They're learning by doing. This is what adult learning science teaches us. Adults learn by doing. So, what Your Way is, Mike, is essentially we are making professional development an entirely new experience that teachers now love. Because now they're saying, wait a minute, you just saved me time and I'm doing better at my job. New game. It's a
Absolutely.
whole new game. So we are thrilled, and we are seeing results that used to take months, take weeks, used to take weeks, take days. We're seeing teachers shift practice immediately, and this is why I really think that we're on the cusp of something, not just as our organization, but when
Mhm.
generative AI, especially, is leveraged well, we're on the cusp of something truly powerful. So that's what Your Way is. That's what we're doing. And it's just been tremendously exciting.
Jason, wow. To my audience, please go back. This is another answer you want to unpack. What resonates with me, right? And first of all, Jason, congratulations with Your Way Learning. You are truly one of the disruptors in our field and just love following your work, Jason. Just love speaking with you, calling you up and everything. But what resonated with me, Jason, was the phrase of it's a phase of internalization, right?
Hmm.
And I love the example because, and we hear this nationally, Jason, that, we want to get back time. We want to get back time
Yeah.
to practitioners, get back time to the school or leaders. But if we get back time, what's the effectiveness or quality of that time? Right. And I'm so glad that you stated that because if we're able to get back time but improve quality and effectiveness within our classrooms, like you stated, it is a whole new ball game with that. Learner variability has become immense in education now, but I really love the intentionality of the development of the practitioner, that phase
Yeah.
of internalization, and of course, that immediate impact. But Jason, I'm going to get into a very provocative question. Okay.
Hmm.
And you and I, we talk about this all the time. You were the Lone Ranger in the BC stage of education in this
Hmm.
space. Now you're seeing people like me, Jason, and others coming up that are coming to you and talking to you about this topic. And I think that it needs to be discussed more holistically because, again, Jason, as you were the pioneer of this and me entering into this space, the only people I really see are Jason Green and a few others. But African Americans in the edtech ecosystem, right? I just joined this recently. I'm considered a neophyte. I still call you up. Hey, Jason, what you think about this? But I only see a few others of
Mm.
black and brown that look like us or that are part of this ecosystem now, whereas the student demographics are 57%. nationally,
Mhm.
right? Representation does matter in the ed tech space. Some people that are at that startup stage who want to connect with a Jason Green might not have that network effect
Mhm.
to get to a Jason Green. It becomes very lonely, as most superintendents know about this, right? And just now we're facing a crisis within this, and we need to see representation in this ecosystem. But Jason, if I'm a black or brown leader, CEO, want to actually penetrate this ecosystem of the ed tech world, right? What advice, please, what advice? This is a huge audience that we have here. What
Yeah.
advice do you have for someone trying to advance their solution, product, or company? And you, Jason, I'll say this as a very highly successful Black entrepreneur who has a thriving ed tech company, as we just heard. What are the strategies for success for minority owned companies in education?
Yeah, this to me is such a big issue. It's one that I'm very passionate about for a number of reasons. We're seeing the impact of this in even how people talk about the bias in large language models. Part of why that bias is there and wasn't caught was because there wasn't diversity in the spaces where the LLMs were getting created, and when folks like Joy Buolamwini and others tried to flag it, it just kept pushing forward. And so there is a real impact when diversity is not present. There's a real impact when whether it's at the LLM level, the developer level, where we now exist developing actual software, when that diversity is not there, then the solutions that are created, I think, are not the best they can possibly be, especially for diverse learners.
Yeah.
I developed from a frame of I was a black child, oftentimes in classrooms that weren't representative of me. So I know directly the experience of what it means to actually be not seen or heard in curriculum, in instruction, in software. So when we develop, that's not foreign. That is something that I know to be extremely critical in the whole process. So when I look at and think about the importance of this, it's huge. When I think about people of color coming into this space and trying to actually make their do something that's very hard, which is starting a business or getting a solution out there, it's very, very difficult. I think about a couple of things. The first is deeply understand the problem you're trying to solve.
Absolutely.
Deeply, right?
Mm.
This is frank. Deeply understand the problem you're trying to solve. Take the time to actually talk to the practitioners, talk to the folks that are in the challenge. If you're not one of them directly, spend time with them, learn what the challenge is, really get grounded with the problem you're trying to solve. First and foremost, right? Then what I would say is assess what you have at your disposal. One very real thing, there's a stat that says less than 2% of venture capital funding goes to Black-led organizations. That is very critical when it comes to getting a software company off the ground. Oftentimes, we don't have the same level of access to networks, to money, to capital, to resources. So then what we have to do is, and my advice would be, assess what you do have. Maybe it's not direct access to capital. Maybe it's not, those things, but maybe it's other things that you can really leverage. A relationship, a pilot group, ways to actually get to grants, things like that. Being able to assess what you have available will then make other things available, right?
Mhm.
We have to be able to be very crystal clear about how we're leveraging our resources, our assets, and make the most of them. The last one that I'll share is as you're going through this process, be in a constant state of both humility and learning because what you thought was the thing, and I just shared my story, right? We've been in this for almost 10 years now. And we're pivoting right now because we've learned and we are innovating every single day based upon how what we're learning, how the world is changing, how technology is shifting. The third thing I would say is be in a space where you're always willing and able to be self-reflective to say, all right, learn this, need to shift there, need to shift. So that way you're in this evolution, both for yourself, but also with how the rapidity of how the world is actually being impacted by now this AI and other technology.
Thank you, Jason, for that. And I'll tell you this, and personally, thank you, because to my audience, and I remember when this was after the book, Jason, and I remember I called you up and I said, I'm thinking about this was October 2022. Yes, thinking about doing something in tech. And I remember, Jason, we had this conversation. I'll never forget what you said. You said, Mike, you lived in the space. What challenge are you going to solve? Right.
Yeah.
And that was 2 years ago, right? And you're like, use your networks to be able to identify what
Mhm.
problem you're going to solve. And then 2 years later, and Jason and I have been having a myriad of conversations. He knew about the agile diagnostic and AI platform since it was just an, yeah, Jason, tech platform, something. But yes, thank you for that because those strategies, Jason,
Mhm.
might not be available,
Mhm.
to, a person of color who's trying to start, have create a startup
Yeah.
or trying to develop tech around software. I
Yeah.
know when you talk about the LLMs, when you talk about the software engineers and the statisticians, psychometricians, these models that they're designing, the mind frame, and no fault to them, but um, there needs to be representation when these
Mhm.
models are being trained and developed and the algorithms are being conceptualized as well. So
Yeah.
appreciate that. But I'm gonna limit you to 3 words on this question. All right, I know it's hard, brother, but three words, but nobody listens. You're a disruptor, so obviously you're going to tinker around the edges. But Jason, what 3 words do you want our audience today to leave with regarding innovation, AI expansion, and impactful solutions to achieve excellence in the AC stage of education?
Man, that's great. The three words that I would that's coming to mind right now for me are don't limit imagination. Don't limit imagination. I sat with a group. I know we're wrapping up. We're doing a partnership now with Digital Promise, where they have
Yeah,
this incredible framework around learner variability, and it's probably some of the best research I've seen in how to address learner variability. But it's this massive roadmap that teachers fumble through because it takes so much time to figure it out. So Digital Promise came to us and they said, is there anything that we can do to make this easier for teachers? Like, what could we dream up? So we actually partnered with Digital Promise, Mike, to take this extremely robust, complicated roadmap around learner variability. They call it Learner Variability Navigator with your way, where now any teacher anywhere can in seconds have the precise recommendations on how to work with different learners in seconds. We had to imagine that that was possible, and we couldn't limit. I don't. That's good. I don't know if we can do that. And every day, I'm sharing with educators. Don't let what you thought used to be a limitation still be a limitation, because now we can actually push through things in a way that we just weren't able to before. So I'm gonna say, don't limit your imagination.
don't limit your imagination. And obviously, whoever engages or works with Jason Green and his team, I can assure you they will not limit your imagination. Mr. Jason Green, VFP, thank you. Look, my audience, I know they're going to want to get in contact with you. How would they be able to do that as a next step?
Would love to hear from folks. I think hopefully people can see my email here on the screen, Jason Green at linklearning.com. You can also find us at yourwaylearning.com. Please be in touch. This is one of those world-changing moments that we're in right now. And it's just an exciting space. So Mike, I so appreciate the time that you've given me Thank you for your work and your leadership. I admire what you've been up to. And I learn from you every day. So keep it up and thank you.
Thank you, Jason. That you listen, we're going to cut out the whole other hour and just play that last 5 seconds. That's going to be my promo video. I tell you, listen, Jason, thank you for being a mentor, a friend, a confidant, holding me accountable for all of my solution services and product, but above all, just being the pioneer in the ed tech field. I appreciate everything that you're doing. Hey, brother, enjoy. I'm going to be seeing you soon, and
Yeah,
I'm going to call you so you know that. But appreciate you for coming on VFE and doing this for me.
absolutely. Keep it up. Thank you.
Thank you. And on that note, everybody, onward and upward. Have a great evening.